I want you to start off today by just picturing a scene for a second.
Okay, setting the stage. I like it.
Yeah, just imagine a dense, like almost impenetrable ancient Indian forest. The canopy is so thick that the sunlight barely even hits the forest floor, you know?
Right. Very dark, very isolated.
Exactly. And hiding in the shadows of these ancient trees is a highway robber. And we are talking about a violent, just completely merciless bandit.
A truly terrifying guy.
Oh, totally. Like a man whose entire survival model is predicated on ambushing vulnerable travelers, taking absolutely everything they have, and just leaving a trail of devastation and bodies in his wake.
Yeah, a brutal existence.
It really is. Now, I want you to really lock that image into your mind. Hold on to the sheer brutality of it, because I'm going to ask you to imagine that exact same person, that ruthless, blood-soaked criminal, spontaneously inventing the very concept of poetry.
Which is just, I mean, it's a massive cognitive leap.
Right. And I don't mean coming up with, like, a clever little rhyming couplet. I mean architecting a 24,000-verse literary, mathematical, and spiritual masterpiece, a text that essentially becomes the foundational bedrock of an entire civilization.
It sounds like an impossible contradiction, honestly.
Yeah, it totally does. How do you possibly get from point A, the violent bandit in the dirt, to point B, the enlightened, world-altering literary genius?
That is the big question.
Well, that massive, seemingly impossible gulf is the paradox of Maharishi Valmiki. He is revered across millennia as the Adi Kavi, which that translates directly to the first poet of India, right?
Yes, the first poet. And it is a phenomenal paradox. Frankly, it's one of the most compelling, structurally complex transformation narratives in human history.
Absolutely.
But to even begin to understand the sheer scope of what we are looking at today in this deep dive, we have to acknowledge that our source material is incredibly diverse, and sometimes it's entirely contradictory.
Yeah, we've got quite the stack today.
We really do. We are synthesizing ancient spiritual texts and modern devotional interpretations, like the Heart of Hinduism project, plus the intricate philosophical discourses of Swami Krishnananda.
Which are super dense but fascinating.
Very dense. But we are also cross-referencing those traditional theological narratives with rigorous, somewhat controversial modern academia.
Right, the sociological angle.
Exactly. We're looking at a fascinating socio-political analysis by Dr. Geoffrey S., published in the Advanced International Journal for Research, as well as a deep philosophical breakdown from the International Journal for Innovative Research in Multidisciplinary Field.
And we even have geographical and historical records tying this ancient, seemingly mythological figure to the founding of modern, bustling cities today.
Which really grounds the whole thing in reality.
It does.
Right.
Which means we aren't just recounting a mythological origin story today. We are looking at this figure through multiple lenses, you know, theology, sociology, linguistics, psychology.
It's a full 360-degree view.
That's the goal. The mission of this deep dive is to completely unpack the myth, the man, and the sprawling intellectual legacy of Valmiki.
Because we have to explore the actual mechanics of his transformation, right? Like, how does a single profound psychological trauma birth the entirety of Sanskrit literature?
Exactly. And we're going to decode the hidden, almost unbelievable mathematical structures embedded deep within the verses of his epic, the Ramayana.
The math is, well, it'll blow your mind when we get there.
I still can't wrap my head around it.
Yeah.
And we're also going to examine a modern academic theory that suggests his miraculous supernatural origin story might actually be a historical cover-up.
Yeah, mythological veil placed over something even more extraordinary.
Right, like maybe he was a marginalized intellectual genius who entirely disrupted the elite hierarchy of his time.
And that tension, you know, between the miraculous and the sociological, that's what makes this so intensely relevant.
Yeah, totally. Whether you are listening to this because you're interested in the mechanics of spiritual enlightenment, or you're just someone who is captivated by a historical mystery, like how ancient masterpieces were actually constructed, this exploration is going to challenge your fundamental assumptions.
It challenges how we think about the nature of genius, really, and the reality of moral redemption.
And the mechanisms behind the stories societies choose to tell about their greatest minds. So let's jump right into the woods.
Let's do it.
We have to start with the traditional narrative of his origin, because before we can analyze the staggering architecture of his poetry, we have to look at the psychological ground zero.
The wake-up call that started it all.
Exactly. So how does the traditional story kick off?
Well, according to the traditional, widely accepted accounts, Valmiki actually wasn't born a bandit. He was born into a Brahmin family.
Okay, so the scholarly class.
Right, the son of a sage named Pracheta. The Brahmins were the priestly class. But the legend dictates that he was kidnapped as a very young child and raised by a Beta or Bill community.
Which is a completely different world.
Entirely different. They were a community of hunters and forest dwellers. So in this environment, completely stripped of his scholarly heritage, he grew up to become known as Ratnakar.
And Ratnakar was definitely not a philosopher.
No, not at all. He was a ruthless highwayman. The ancient sources describe him as a man who lived deep in the jungle with his wife and children, and his sole methodology for providing for them was extreme violence.
Wow.
Yeah. No one who passed through his territory was safe. He robbed, he killed, and he basically accumulated a massive metaphysical debt of violence.
It's just the starkest possible contrast to the title of first poet.
Yeah.
I mean, he is literally executing travelers to put food on his family's table.
He is entirely consumed by the material survival of the immediate present.
Right. And the inciting incident, this specific moment that fractures his reality, happens when a very specific, highly unusual traveler comes walking down his path.
Enter sage Narada Muni.
Yes, Narada.
In Hindu tradition, Narada is such a fascinating figure. He is described as the wandering son of Brahma, the creator.
He's kind of a cosmic instigator, isn't he?
He really is. He travels across the realms, moving between the worlds of gods and men. He carries news, stirs up necessary trouble, and sparks spiritual awakenings.
So Narada is walking through Ratnakar's forest.
Completely unarmed, happily playing his stringed musical instrument, the veena, and just singing devotional songs.
And Ratnakar spots an easy target.
Oh, absolutely. Ratnakar drops down from a tree with a heavy thud, blocks the path, flashes his weapon, and threatens to kill the sage right there if he doesn't hand over whatever wealth he has.
See, I always find Narada's reaction in these texts to be incredible because Ratnakar is projecting maximum physical threat. He's trying to be this terrifying, lethal force of nature.
And Narada's just completely unfazed.
Right, it's like a mountain reacting to a strong breeze. He looks at this blood-soaked bandit kindly, and instead of begging for his life or trying to fight, he asks a simple question.
Why do you want to kill me? I haven't done anything to you.
Exactly. And Ratnakar gives this very pragmatic, almost chillingly bureaucratic answer.
Yeah.
He basically says, look, it's not personal. It's just business. I need your wealth to look after my wife and my children. Just hand it over or you die.
And the psychology of Narada's response here is just a masterclass in intervention. I mean, he doesn't engage with the physical threat at all.
He totally bypasses the sword.
He bypasses it entirely and attacks the fundamental moral justification that Ratnakar has built his entire life around. Narada tells him, very well, do as you please, take what you want.
Just calling his bluff.
Totally. But consider this. You say you are committing all these horrific sins for the sake of your wife and children. They are at home, happily consuming the food and enjoying the wealth you bring them. But will they also share the burden of the spiritual sins you are accumulating to get it?
It's a devastating trap.
It really is.
Narada is planting a seed of existential doubt in a mind that has never once questioned itself. And Ratnakar is so deeply entrenched in his own justifications that he doesn't even see the trap closing.
He's completely confident.
Yeah, he tells the sage, of course they will. Why else would I be out here committing murder for their sake? We share everything.
But Narada just shakes his head. He gives him this calm, pitying look and tells Ratnakar to go home and ask them to be absolutely sure.
He even lets Ratnakar tie him to a tree, just to ensure the sage won't escape while Ratnakar runs back to his hut to get the confirmation.
Right. And here we are witnessing the setup for a profound psychological shattering. Ratnakar runs home, gathers his wife and his children around him, and asks them the question that he honestly believes is merely a formality.
I have been robbing and killing for you.
Exactly. I bring all the wealth here and we share it. Tell me that you will also take an equal share of the terrible sins I have earned to provide this life for us.
And his family completely unequivocally pulls the rug out from under him.
They are horrified by the suggestion.
I bet. The text described them essentially telling him, we are your dependents. Under the social law, it is your absolute duty to maintain us and feed us. We never once asked you to commit murder to do it.
The method was your choice.
The sins belong to you, and you alone.
Ouch. And if we pull back and look at the philosophical framework operating here, this is a brutal, immediate collision with the reality of karma.
Right. Karma isn't just a metaphor here.
Not at all. In the Hindu tradition, karma isn't just some vague concept of what goes around comes around. It is the immutable, inescapable law of action and consequence. It is an absolute cosmic ledger.
And Ratnakar realizes in a terrifying flash of clarity that individual moral accountability cannot be outsourced.
You cannot transfer your spiritual debt to your beneficiaries. It doesn't matter how noble you thought your intentions were.
I think this resonates so deeply because, honestly, it mirrors dynamics we still see all the time today.
Oh, absolutely. Give me an example.
Think about a highly toxic corporate environment, or even a deeply dysfunctional family system. You have the person who acts as the fixer.
Right, the one doing the dirty work.
Exactly. They are out there compromising their own ethics, cutting corners, lying, or taking all the emotional heat to protect the team or keep the family afloat. Yeah. And they sleep at night by telling themselves, I'm carrying this burden for them. I am the shield.
Not then.
But the moment the audit happens, the moment the legal consequences or the psychological breakdown arrives, everyone else takes a giant step back.
We didn't know anything about it.
Yeah, the family or the corporation says, whoa, nobody asked you to break the law. We just enjoyed the quarterly profits. The prison sentence is entirely yours.
That's a great analogy. Ratnakar realizes, in real time, that he's going to be thrown entirely under the bus of cosmic justice.
Completely under the bus.
He realizes he has been systematically destroying his own soul, life after life, for people who will not and metaphysically cannot share an ounce of the spiritual cost.
That's got to be devastating.
It violently shatters his ego. The entire foundation of his identity as a provider collapses. The sources say he leaves his family, runs frantically back into the forest, unties Narada, and just collapses at his feet in immense, overwhelming grief.
He is entirely broken down.
There is nothing left of his previous identity. He is a blank slate, desperate for a way to save himself from the immense weight of his own actions.
So Narada, having successfully dismantled the bandit, now has to rebuild him.
The reconstruction phase.
Right. He gives Ratnakar a tool for salvation, a specific mantra to chant. But the texts point out that even this doesn't go smoothly, does it?
No, the damage Ratnakar has done to himself is just too deep. The physical and psychological scarring is profound.
What does Narada tell him to do?
Narada tells him to sit and continuously chant the sacred name Rama. The theology dictates that repeating this divine name with absolute concentration and surrender will act as a purifying fire.
Burning away his accumulated karmic debt.
Exactly. But there is a massive psychosomatic block. Because Ratnakar has spoken nothing but harsh, cruel, and violent words for his entire existence, his physiology literally rebels against the sacred.
Wait, his body actually rejects the word?
The sources say his tongue and jaw physically cannot form the syllables of the holy name. He tries to say Rama, but the word simply will not come out.
I find that to be such a haunting detail. His body has adapted to violence so completely that it rejects holiness like a transplanted organ. His vocal cords only know how to threaten and curse.
It's tragic. So Narada, being the ultimate spiritual pragmatist, has to come up with a workaround.
And it is a brilliant linguistic workaround. What does he do?
Narada looks at this struggling, desperate man and says, all right, if your mouth cannot form the word Rama, can you say the word Mara?
And Mara means?
In Sanskrit, Mara translates to death or kill.
Wow. And Ratnakar, the highwayman, grasps onto this immediately.
Of course. He's probably thinking, death, killing. Absolutely. Those are the only concepts I truly understand. I can say that all day long.
He's back in his comfort zone.
Precisely. So he sits down and starts forcefully repeating it. Mara, Mara, Mara.
But Narada knows what's going to happen.
Narada is employing the mechanics of sound and repetition. If you repeat a two-syllable word fast enough and continuously enough, the boundaries between the syllables dissolve. They just bleed into each other.
Mara, Mara.
And within moments, without any conscious effort or resistance from his traumatized body, the sequence flips. Ratnakar is no longer chanting death. He is chanting Rama, 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 Rama.
That is so clever. The divine name just sneaks past his psychological defenses.
It's essentially a spiritual hack. He is utterly captivated by the vibration of the chant. He closes his eyes, turns his awareness inward, and enters a state of meditation.
And this isn't just like sitting quietly for an hour.
Oh, no.
Ugh.
He enters a state of samadhi, a meditative absorption so deep, so absolute, that his consciousness detaches entirely from the physical world. He loses all track of time.
The imagery in the source texts regarding this meditation is staggering. I mean, he sits so incredibly still, locked in this trance for so many years, that the jungle ecosystem basically reclaims his body.
He becomes part of the landscape.
Yeah. Ants, worms, and insects crawl over him. They build their nests in the folds of his skin. Eventually, an enormous, towering anthill completely covers his physical form. He is buried alive by the slow, relentless movement of nature.
And the Sanskrit word for an anthill is Valmika.
Right.
The texts say that he remained inside this anthill for an entire age, a massive expanse of time. Through this intense, unwavering penance, the sheer heat of his focused consciousness burned away the mountains of negative karma he had accumulated.
Until his mind became perfectly purified.
Perfectly still. Finally, he attains self-realization. He sees the divine reality within his own heart. A divine voice commands him to rise. He breaks the hardened earth of the anthill apart from the inside and steps out into the light.
He's no longer Ratnakar the bandit.
No, he has been born out of the anthill, and therefore he receives his new name, Valmiki, the one born from the Valmika.
It is the ultimate story of rebirth. He has had this massive tectonic spiritual awakening. He's gone from a murderer to an enlightened, purified sage.
A complete 180.
And this is massive, but that still doesn't explain the poetry.
Ah, right.
Being a calm, enlightened sage does not automatically grant you the ability to invent complex, metered verse. Like, how do we get from a guy who just spent decades sitting silently in a pile of dirt to the architect of Sanskrit literature?
It's a huge jump, and this transition is what the ancient sources refer to as the movement from shoka to shloka.
From grief to poetry.
Yes. To trace the birth of the poetic form itself, we have to look at a highly specific incident that occurred sometime later. Valmiki is now an established sage, living quietly on the banks of the river Tamasa near the Ganges. One morning, he is returning from his ritual bath in the river. He is in a state of tranquil observation. He looks up and sees two croncha birds, which are often described as a type of crane or dove flying together.
The texts are very deliberate in setting the emotional scene here, aren't they?
Very. The birds are mating. They are joyful, completely innocent, entirely absorbed in their love for one another. They represent the pure, untouched beauty of the natural world.
And then the violence that he left behind in his past life violently intrudes upon the present.
Out of the dense brush, a hunter's arrow flies upward and strikes the male bird directly in the heart.
Oh, wow.
The bird plummets to the ground, bleeding out, thrashing in the dirt. The female bird, witnessing her mate's sudden, violent death, descends. She flies frantically around his dying body, crying out, moaning in absolute piercing agony.
And we have to remember Valmiki's state of mind here. He has spent decades purifying his consciousness. The barriers of his ego are entirely gone. His empathy is completely unprotected.
He is radically open.
So when he hears the cries of this female bird, he doesn't just feel bad for her. He experiences her agonizing, world-shattering grief as if it were burning inside his own chest.
The Sanskrit word for this specific, profound, overwhelming sorrow is shoka. He is drowning in shoka.
And it is in this state of overwhelming emotional overload, this pure, unadulterated compassion, mixed with sudden anger at the sheer, senseless cruelty of the act, that Valmiki looks at the hunter hiding in the bushes. And a curse spontaneously erupts from his mouth.
It just pours out of him.
I want to read the exact quote here from our sources, because the phonetic structure of this is crucial to the story. He cries out, Man nishada pratishtatum samagas ashwati sama, yat gruncha mithunarikam sokam avadim kama mohitam.
Which roughly translates into English too.
O fowler, O hunter, may you find no rest or peace for the rest of your endless years, for you have killed this innocent bird who was completely absorbed in love.
But the narrative hinge of the entire civilization's literature happens the second those words leave his lips. Valmiki stops dead in his tracks. He is completely shocked by his own voice.
Because he realizes it's not just a normal sentence.
Right. He realizes that he hasn't just yelled a chaotic, angry sentence at a hunter. The words that just involuntarily poured out of him have a perfect symmetrical rhythm. They possess a specific recurring meter of 8 syllables per quarter.
They have a recognizable, repeatable melody.
The sheer pressure of his profound sorrow, his shoka, acted as a crucible, forging human language into a perfectly structured aesthetic form. He has inadvertently created the very first shloka, the first sacred, metered verse of poetry in the history of the world.
It is such a beautiful concept. The idea that the chaotic, jagged structure of human grief spontaneously generated the symmetrical ordering structure of human arc.
That the universe demands form when emotion becomes too large to be contained in ordinary speech.
Exactly. But we can't stop at the rhythm. Because if we look at the discourse provided by Swami Krishnananda in our sources, he points out a detail about this specific curse that is absolutely fundamentally mind-bending.
Swami Krishnananda's literary analysis here reveals the staggering depth of Sanskrit as a language. He points out that when Valmiki uttered those exact syllables in anger, intending to curse the hunter to a life of misery, he didn't realize that the exact same phonetic sequence contained a perfectly valid, entirely hidden secondary meaning.
Right. It's like an auditory illusion, like one of those visual puzzles where if you look at it one way, it's a rabbit, and if you look at it another way, it's a duck.
But this is happening with ancient theology.
Which is wild. How does that even work?
By simply juxtaposing the Sanskrit syllables slightly differently, shifting the breaks between the words without changing the sounds themselves, the angry curse transforms into a supreme devotional glorification of God.
Okay, let me hear the breakdown of that.
Let me break it down. The phrase manashada in the curse meant "O fowler" or "O hunter." However, the syllable ma also stands for Lakshmi, the goddess of prosperity and divine grace. And the word nishada means abode or dwelling place. So manashada seamlessly becomes O abode of Mahalakshmi, which is a highly specific, revered epithet for Lord Narayana or Vishnu, the supreme preserver of the universe.
So if we apply that secondary linguistic mapping to the rest of the sentence, what does the curse actually say?
The hidden translation reveals itself as, O abode of Mahalakshmi, may your glory and peace last forever and ever, because you brought an end to the one who was sensuously attached to his ego and desires.
Right.
Now, place this in the larger context of the epic. Valmiki is destined to write the Ramayana. In the epic, God incarnates as Rama to defeat the tyrannical demon king Ravana. In this hidden meaning, the bird represents innocent, vulnerable humanity, and the hunter represents the demonic force of Ravana.
So in the exact fraction of a second that Valmiki thinks he is cursing a random hunter in the woods, he is simultaneously, unwittingly composing the perfect theological opening invocation.
Praising God for descending to earth to defeat evil.
I have to stop us here, because
Yep.
anyone listening to this is likely having the exact same thought I am. Did Valmiki do this on purpose? I mean, can a human brain consciously encode a massive theological prayer into a spontaneous, emotionally explosive curse? Or is this just the structural mathematical magic of the Sanskrit language allowing for infinite pareidolia where we just see the patterns we want to see?
That question sits at the very center of the eternal debate regarding the nature of genius and divine inspiration.
Have to, right.
The traditional devotional view, which Swami Krishnananda champions, is that Valmiki absolutely did not know he was doing it. The conscious mind of the former bandit could not have engineered that.
It's too complex.
Right. The traditional texts say that immediately after this event, Brahma, the creator god himself, materialized before Valmiki. Brahma essentially tells him, do not be confused. The meter that came out of your mouth was my design.
I gave you that.
You have unwittingly started the glory of Rama. Now, I ordain you to use this exact rhythmic meter to write the entire history of Rama's life. So, the tradition views Valmiki as a perfectly emptied vessel.
He was so purified by his decades in the anthill that God was able to speak perfect, multi-layered polysemic poetry through his grief.
That's the traditional view.
The empty vessel theory is beautiful from a theological standpoint. But when you look at the final architecture of the text he eventually produces the Ramayana, it suggests an intellect that is operating on an incredibly high, terrifyingly conscious level of deliberate planning.
We have to talk about the math embedded in the epic.
Yes, because it throws a massive wrench into the idea of spontaneous, unthinking inspiration.
The mathematical precision of the Valmiki Ramayana is, frankly, staggering. It requires a level of logistical mastery that is hard to comprehend. The complete epic consists of exactly 24,000 verses.
24,000.
Okay, now parallel to this, in Hinduism, there is a fiercely guarded, incredibly sacred chant called the Gayatri Mantra. It is considered the mother of all mantras, the essence of the Vedas. And the Gayatri Mantra consists of exactly 24 syllables.
A 24-syllable mantra and a 24,000-verse poem. The numbers align perfectly.
They don't just align. They are woven together with architectural precision. In the Valmiki Ramayana, for every block of 1,000 verses, the very first letter of that specific milestone verse corresponds sequentially to a letter in the 24-syllable Gayatri Mantra.
Wait, really?
Yes. So the first verse of the epic begins with the syllable ta, the first sound of the mantra. You read 999 verses. Then the 1001st verse begins with the second syllable of the mantra. The 2001st verse begins with the third.
That is insane.
This unbroken acrostic pattern continues precisely 24 times across the entire expanse of the 24,000 verses.
I really want you, the listener, to think about the logistics of that for a second. We were talking about ancient India. He is writing on palm leaves or composing this entirely in his head through oral tradition.
There is no word processor.
There is no backspace. You can't just write a chapter, realize you were 3 verses short of your 1,000-verse milestone, and go back and insert some filler sentences to make the math work.
No, the narrative has to flow perfectly.
The meter has to remain flawless. The theology has to be profound, and you have to hit a highly specific phonetic target every 1,000th verse without missing a beat.
It's unbelievable.
That is not an accident. That is not a guy just spontaneously crying out feelings. That requires intense drafting, structural mapping, and an absolute unrivaled mastery of language.
The sources even note that modern scholars have extracted these specific 24 milestone verses, and they are chanted on their own as a condensed, immensely powerful text known as the Gayatri Ramayana.
And this mathematical reality brings us to a crucial, unavoidable pivot in our deep dive.
The tension.
Exactly. The sheer grinding intellectual rigor required to engineer a text with that level of hidden architecture creates a massive tension with the origin story we just spent 20 minutes discussing.
You don't accidentally math your way into a 24,000-verse fractal puzzle just because an anthill grew over you.
Right. And this structural tension is exactly what modern secular academics are investigating, which naturally moves us away from the mythological and into the sociological.
A different lens entirely.
Because we have this glaring contrast. On one side, the traditional story is entirely reliant on divine intervention. Magical anthills, sudden memory wipes, spontaneous dual-meaning curses birthed from a bird's death, and Brahma physically handing down the meter.
But on the other side,
modern academics look at a mathematically perfect 24,000-verse epic, and they see rigorous, intensive, grueling human intellectual labor.
To explore this conflict, we turn to the paper by Dr. Jyothi S., published in the Advanced International Journal for Research. Now, it is vital to frame this correctly.
Yes, please.
We are exploring Dr. Jyothi's socio-political perspective impartially. Her academic framework isn't interested in weighing in on the reality of theology or diminishing faith. She is analyzing the mechanisms of history.
How society operates.
Exactly. She is examining how ancient social structures reacted to and ultimately processed the sudden emergence of inexplicable genius, especially when that genius emerged from a place it fundamentally wasn't supposed to.
So what is the core of her argument? She looks at Valmiki's origins differently.
She points out that historically, numerous traditions associate Valmiki closely with the Beta or hunter-gatherer community. This was a socially marginalized group, situated far outside the elite centers of power within the rigid caste hierarchy of ancient India.
And why does that specific social placement matter so much when it comes to writing poetry?
Because in ancient Indian society, access to literature, philosophical training, and most importantly, the Sanskrit language itself, were fiercely systematically guarded.
It wasn't just like public school for everyone.
Not at all. Sanskrit was not the language of the common street. It was the language of the gods, the language of high theology, and the language of political power. Education in Sanskrit was largely restricted to the elite privileged classes, primarily the Brahmins.
The scholarly gatekeepers.
Yes. The structural assumption of the society was that only the socially elite possessed the intellectual capacity and the spiritual purity required to master this language and produce high theology.
So let's play this out logically. If you have an entire society that operates on the strict, unyielding assumption that only the elite are capable of mastering Sanskrit, what happens when someone from a marginalized, forest-dwelling, non-elite background suddenly produces the greatest, most structurally complex piece of Sanskrit literature ever written?
It creates an immediate, massive cognitive dissonance for the ruling elite. It is a direct threat to the established social order.
Because it breaks their whole rule book.
Exactly. If a marginalized person can write the Ramayana, then the entire justification for gatekeeping education and hoarding social power collapses. Dr. Jyothi argues that when societies are faced with this kind of structural threat, they deploy a sociological mechanism called mythologization to resolve the tension.
Walk me through how mythologization actually works in practice. How do you spin a masterpiece?
When a marginalized individual produces a world-changing intellectual achievement, the societal elites cannot simply go on record and say, "Wow, This person from a lower social stratum worked incredibly hard, studied intensely, and proved to be intellectually superior to our best scholars.
Because that would ruin the whole hierarchy.
Acknowledging that human effort would democratize intellect, instead, the society invents a supernatural transformation narrative.
Ah, I see. So instead of acknowledging his decades of unseen, grueling study and his raw intellectual horsepower, they change the source of the power. They say, well, he didn't do it. God did it through him.
Exactly. The narrative is carefully reconstructed. He was a degraded, uneducated criminal. He had no skills. But then the divine intervened, an anthill covered him, his past was erased, and he was miraculously transformed into a vessel.
Wow.
By attributing his staggering poetic genius to divine intervention or magical force events, society neatly avoids the deeply uncomfortable truth that intellectual brilliance can, and does, emerge from marginalized communities through sheer effort, discipline, and study.
The story shifts from a celebration of a marginalized man's unstoppable intellect to a story about a sinner's submission to divine authority.
It neuters the threat.
That is an incredibly powerful, somewhat unsettling lens through which to view history. It makes you question how many human achievements have been wrapped up in magic to protect the status quo.
Dr. Jayathi's paper grounds this theory by providing illustrative comparisons from other texts and eras. She brings up the story of Ekalavya, which is another famous narrative from the other great Indian epic, the Mahabharata.
Yes, the story of Ekalavya perfectly illustrates the violent pushback against non-elite mastery. Tell us about him.
Ekalavya was a young man from a tribal, forest-dwelling community, very similar to the background attributed to Valmiki. Ekalavya desperately wanted to learn the advanced martial art of archery.
But the royal teacher, Dronacharya, flatly refused to accept him as a student because Ekalavya wasn't from the Kshatriya, or elite warrior caste.
Right. But Ekalavya refuses to accept the gatekeeping. He goes back to the forest, builds a clay statue of Dronacharya to serve as his symbolic guru, and practices relentlessly, day and night, entirely on his own.
And through pure, unguided dedication, he becomes a vastly superior archer to the royal princes who were receiving the elite, formal training.
But look at how the society reacts when they discover his talent. It isn't celebrated as a triumph of the human spirit. It is perceived as an existential threat to the hierarchy.
The royal prince, Arjuna, must remain the best.
So Dronacharya approaches Ekalavya and demands his teacher's fee. He demands Ekalavya cut off his own right thumb and give it to him.
Which is just brutal.
Ekalavya, bound by the social dictates of devotion, complies, permanently crippling himself and ending his ability to ever challenge the royal archers. Dr. Jyoti uses this to vividly illustrate the historic, systemic anxiety the elite classes felt when undeniable talent emerged from outside the traditional social boundaries.
Ekalavya was physically crippled. Dr. Jyoti argues Valmiki was narratively crippled.
That's a perfect way to phrase it. And to bring this theory crashing into the modern era, she compares Valmiki's situation to a historical figure from the 20th century. She draws a parallel to BR Ambedkar.
Right. For those who might not know the deep history, Dr. Ambedkar was born into a marginalized elite caste in India, a community that faced horrific, systemic discrimination and was treated as untouchable.
The social barriers against his education were immense.
Yet he fought through them to become one of the most brilliant, transformative intellectuals of the modern era. He held doctorates from Columbia University and the London School of Economics, and he was the chief architect of the modern Indian Constitution.
And the comparison Dr. Jyoti draws here is vital for understanding the mechanics of myth-making. Because Dr. Ambedkar lived in the 20th century, an era of recorded history, universities, journalism, and printing presses, society could not invent a magical story to explain away his genius.
No one could claim he sat in an anthill and God handed him the Constitution.
Exactly. The historical record forced society to attribute his success to its actual source. Relentless education, staggering, grueling intellectual labor, and unyielding determination in the face of oppression.
But Dr. Jyoti's piercing point is that if a mind exactly like Ambedkar's had existed 3,000 years ago, before the printing press, the surrounding society absolutely would have created a myth to explain him away, just as they likely did with Valmiki.
It's very likely.
I think there is a profound lesson here for you, the listener, today. Because while we might not invent literal magical anthills anymore, we still engage in subtle forms of mythologization.
Oh, all the time.
Think about how often in modern culture or corporate life we look at the massive success of an underdog or someone who broke out of a disadvantaged background, and we use words that diminish their agency. We say they were lucky, or they had natural raw talent, or they just happened to be in the right place at the right time.
We lean on those concepts because it's easier than acknowledging the grueling, unseen, systematic, 80-hour-a-week intellectual labor they put in to destroy the barriers in front of them.
We still prefer the myth of the spark over the reality of the grind.
That is a very sharp observation. We still struggle to accurately weigh human labor. And if we follow Dr. Jyothi's argument to its logical conclusion, and we choose to view Valmiki not as an empty, miraculous conduit, but as a profound, fiercely hardworking human intellectual, it entirely changes how we must interact with his work.
It changes the whole context.
It means the texts he produced are not just dictated divine memos. They are the synthesized, hard-fought philosophies of a man who spent a lifetime observing human nature, society, and the cosmos.
Which means we need to actually look at what he wrote. We need to examine the philosophies that required that level of genius to construct.
Let's do it.
Let's look at the foundational text, the Ramayana, because in popular culture, it is often reduced to a straightforward, heroic fairy tale.
And it is a massive disservice to reduce it to a fairy tale. Yes, the surface plot is about a prince, Rama, whose wife Sita is kidnapped by a demon king, Ravana, leading to a massive war to rescue her.
Yeah, it's the Hollywood pitch.
But beneath the action sequences, the 24,000 verses serve as a staggering, incredibly dense masterclass in complex moral philosophy. Specifically, Valmiki uses the narrative to stress test the concepts of dharma and bhakti.
Let's break those down, starting with dharma.
Yeah.
Because it's a word that gets thrown around a lot in pop spirituality, but its actual application in these ancient texts is rigorous and often brutal.
Dharma is often loosely translated as righteousness, duty, or moral law. But the critical thing to understand is that Valmiki does not present Dharma as a universal, flat rule book where thou shalt not kill applies equally to everyone in every situation.
It's not a one-size-fits-all.
Not at all. Dharma is highly contextual. Your Dharma changes dynamically based on your specific role in society. The Dharma of a king is different from the Dharma of a husband, which is different from the Dharma of a warrior or a son.
And the genius of Valmiki's writing is that he doesn't just explain these rules. He engineers narrative scenarios where these different dharmas violently collide within the same person.
He forces his characters into impossible ethical corners.
The most famous and, frankly, the most heavily debated example of this occurs at the very culmination of the epic, right?
Yes. Lord Rama is depicted throughout the text as the absolute, unwavering ideal of human conduct. He defeats the demon Ravana. He rescues his wife, Sita, who herself is the ultimate embodiment of purity, grace, and devotion.
And they return triumphantly to their capital city of Ayodhya to rule.
But then the reality of society sets in. Rumors start spreading among the common citizens. The public begins to whisper, questioning Sita's purity simply because she lived as a captive in the house of another man for a year.
And to be clear, Rama knows without a shadow of a doubt that she is entirely innocent and pure, but the public perception is metastasizing.
And here, Valmiki introduces a devastating philosophical trolley problem. Rama is faced with two conflicting dharmas.
His duty as a husband versus his duty as a king.
Exactly. His dharma as a husband dictates that he must protect, cherish, and defend his innocent wife against false accusations. But his dharma as a king dictates that he must maintain the absolute faith, order, and moral standard of his kingdom.
Because in ancient political philosophy, the king is the moral anchor of the state.
If the citizens lose faith in the integrity of the king's household, the social contract breaks down, and the kingdom inevitably falls into chaos and ruin.
So Rama is forced to choose between the woman he loves and the millions of citizens he has sworn to protect. And he makes a choice that is agonizing to read.
What does he do?
He banishes Sita, who was pregnant at the time, to the wild forest, entirely to quell the public unrest and preserve the stability of the state.
It is a deeply uncomfortable, tragic resolution. It is absolutely not a happily ever after.
No, it's brutal.
But it's not supposed to be comfortable. Valmiki is using the medium of the epic to raise deeply unsettling questions about the nature of leadership and the clash between personal ethics and social expectations.
He is demonstrating that in the real complicated world, executing your highest duty often requires unimaginable, soul-crushing personal sacrifice.
He strips away the illusion that doing the right thing will always feel good or make you happy. It is a nuanced, somewhat tragic exploration of the severe burdens of holding power.
And intertwined with this grueling exploration of duty, you mentioned the concept of bhakti.
Yes, bhakti translates to devotion. But in Valmiki's framework, it is not merely blind faith or subservience. It is a transformative, radical surrender of the ego to a higher ideal or a divine presence.
How does he show that in the story?
Valmiki illustrates the mechanics of bhakti perfectly through the character of Hanuman, the monkey deity. Hanuman's devotion to Rama is so absolute, so devoid of personal selfishness or ego, that it literally grants him limitless physical and mystical strength.
It's devotion as a source of actual power.
Valmiki explores how the act of pure devotion itself becomes an active path to spiritual liberation, breaking the bounds of ordinary physical limitations.
Okay, so the Ramayana is this massive, intricate exploration of how we interact with the physical world. It deals with kingship, warfare, societal rules, reputation, and physical duty. It is deeply concerned with how to live in the world.
Very grounded in the material and social reality.
But Valmiki is also widely credited with authoring another major philosophical text, the Yog-Vashista. And when you read the two side by side, it feels like psychological whiplash.
It really does. They feel like they were written by two entirely different minds.
The shift in tone, scope, and subject matter is genuinely remarkable. While the Ramayana is an action-driven narrative epic, the Yog-Vashista is a dense, 32,000-verse philosophical and psychological treatise.
And the framing device of the text is a long, intricate dialogue between the great sage Vashista and a young Prince Rama. But this is Rama before he becomes the great hero of the epic.
Oh, interesting. So it's a prequel, essentially.
Essentially, yes. The premise is that young Rama goes on a grand tour of his kingdom, and instead of being inspired, he returns completely shattered. He has observed sickness, old age, the inevitability of death, and the fleeting, temporary nature of all human desires.
He sees the reality of suffering.
He falls into a profound, paralyzing depression. He essentially looks at the throne, the wealth, and the kingdom and asks, what is the point of engaging with any of this if it all just rots and disappears?
It is a textbook case of ancient existential dread.
Yeah.
He is having a full-blown nihilistic crisis.
Exactly. And Sage Vashista's sweeping answer to Rama's crisis forms the entirety of the text. Vashista doesn't tell him to just cheer up and do his job. Instead, he dismantles Rama's entire perception of reality.
Oh, it's deep.
Very deep.
Yeah.
The core philosophy of the Yog-Vashista is a radical form of Advaita Vedanta, which is the philosophy of strict non-duality.
Non-duality is a heavy, abstract concept. Let's really explore this, because understanding it is key to understanding Valmiki's overarching genius.
The foundational premise of non-duality, as presented in the Yoga-Vashista, is that the entire physical universe as we perceive it, the mountains, the wars, the empires, our own physical bodies, is Maya.
Maya translates to illusion, right?
Yes. But it doesn't mean a cheap magic trick. It means that the material world is not the ultimate objective reality. It is a temporary, subjective projection generated by the mind itself.
So it's all just in our heads.
The philosophy argues that the only true, unchanging reality is the infinite, pure, formless consciousness, often referred to as Brahman, or the self. Everything else is just a temporary wave appearing on the surface of that infinite ocean.
It sounds incredibly modern, almost like simulation theory. Or the way quantum mechanics suggests that the observer influences the reality of the particle.
It's very similar to those concepts.
To explain how we get so trapped in this illusion, the text breaks human psychology down into 4 specific states of consciousness. And I want us to linger here and really unpack them because the logic builds so beautifully. What is the baseline state?
The first baseline state is Jagrat. This is the waking state. It is exactly what you and I are experiencing right now.
Okay, everyday waking life.
In Jagrat, your consciousness is directed outward. You are engaging with the material world through the very limited bandwidth of your 5 physical senses. You perceive objects as solid, you perceive time as linear, and most importantly, you perceive yourself as a distinct, separate entity from the rest of the universe.
Right. I am me, the microphone is the microphone, and the wall is the wall. It feels undeniable because I can knock on it. That's state 1. Where does the philosophy go next to break that assumption?
It moves to the second state, Swapna, the dream state. And Vashista uses this state to completely destabilize Rama's trust in his waking senses.
How so?
When you go to sleep and enter a dream, your mind generates a completely new, immersive reality. In the middle of a nightmare, the monster chasing you feels 100% real. Your heart races, you feel terror, you feel the ground under your feet.
Yeah, you don't know it's a dream while you're in it.
The brain's neurological response to the dream tiger is identical to its response to a waking tiger.
Because to the consciousness experiencing it, the stimuli are functionally identical.
Exactly. But then you wake up, and the second you open your eyes, that entire terrifying solid universe vanishes instantly. You realize it was entirely a projection of your own internal consciousness.
That's a profound realization when it hits you.
The Yog Vashista uses this universally experienced phenomenon to pose a devastating epistemological question. If your mind possesses the power to create a flawlessly convincing multisensory reality while you sleep, what logical proof do you have that your current waking reality isn't just a longer, more stable collective dream?
That is the ultimate philosophical trapdoor. It's Descartes' evil demon, or the Matrix, thousands of years before they existed. You can't definitively prove you aren't dreaming right now.
You really can't.
Okay, so if waking and dreaming are both just different layers of illusion, what is the third state?
The third state is sushupti, which is the state of deep, utterly dreamless sleep. This is where the philosophy gets really profound.
Okay, tell me about deep sleep.
In sushupti, the mind stops projecting entirely. There are no dreams, no images, no thoughts. Consequently, the ego, the concept of I, completely dissolves. You are not aware of the world and you are not aware of yourself.
That's just a blank.
Consciousness becomes dormant, resting in a state of blank, peaceful ignorance.
But I've always found this tricky. If deep sleep is just a blank void of unawareness, how can it even be classified as a state of consciousness? If I don't experience it, does it exist?
Vashista would argue that you do experience it, just not with the tools of the ego. The proof of the consciousness in deep sleep is the continuity of memory when you wake up.
What do you mean?
You wake up and say, I slept deeply, I didn't dream, I feel rested. Who is the I that knows it slept peacefully if the ego is turned off?
Oh, I see.
The underlying consciousness remains awake, silently witnessing the blankness of the mind. Sushupti proves that your true consciousness exists entirely independent of your thoughts, your body, and the external world.
So we have waking illusions, dreaming illusions, and the blank void of deep sleep. What is the ultimate resolution? What is the fourth state?
The culmination of this psychological mapping is the fourth state, known simply as turiya, which literally translates to the four.
Just the fourth.
But turiya isn't really a state that you enter and exit like the others. It is the realization of the underlying reality of pure consciousness itself. Imagine turiya as the movie screen, while the waking, dreaming, and deep sleep states are just different movies being projected onto it.
Oh, that's a great metaphor.
In turiya, you are fully, vibrantly awake, but the ego has permanently dissolved. You no longer identify with the temporary body or the chaotic mind. You realize, experientially, that you are not a separate drop of water. You are the entire ocean.
Which is enlightenment.
Achieving permanent establishment in turiya is the ultimate goal of the text. It is moksha, total liberation. You are entirely freed from the cycle of suffering because you realize that the things that suffer the body and the ego were never the true you to begin with.
And this brings me to the massive, overarching philosophical question that I think defines Valmiki's genius.
How he connects the two texts.
Yes. How does the exact same author write the Ramayana, an epic obsessed with a prince's strict physical duties, fighting real wars, and adhering to strict social codes in the physical world, while simultaneously writing the Yog Vashista, a treatise arguing that the entire physical world, including the wars and the kingdoms, is a total illusion?
It seems like a massive contradiction.
And if the world is just a dream, why on earth should Rama care about ruling his kingdom righteously or fighting demons or doing his dharma? Why not just walk away into the forest and ignore the dream?
That paradox is the exact center of Valmiki's philosophical synthesis. He doesn't view these two texts as contradictory. He views them as sequentially complementary.
How so?
Remember, the Yog Vashista is the teaching Rama receives before the events of the Ramayana take place. Vashista teaches Rama that yes, the world is fundamentally Maya. It is an illusion, a temporary play of infinite consciousness. But, and this is the crucial pivot, while you find yourself cast as a character in the play, you must play your role with absolute, unwavering perfection.
Because realizing it's a play doesn't give you permission to ruin the production for everyone else who still thinks it's real.
Beautifully put. You engage with the world righteously. You fight systemic evil. You protect the innocent. You fulfill your complex dharma to society, but you do it while remaining entirely internally detached from the outcomes and the illusions.
You play the game, but you aren't owned by it.
Exactly. You don't fight the war for your own ego or for greed or because you are attached to the idea of victory, because you know fundamentally that victory and defeat are just dream concepts. You act with complete, intense dedication on the outside and absolute silent peace on the inside.
That is the ultimate integrated model of an enlightened human being that Valmiki is proposing. You are in the world, but not of it.
It's an incredibly practical philosophy despite being so abstract.
That is a staggering intellectual achievement. The ability to hold the absolute emptiness of reality in one hand and the absolute necessity of moral duty in the other, without crushing either.
It really is the pinnacle of his work.
But as we move into the final phase of our deep dive today, we need to bring Valmiki out of the abstract realm of ancient philosophy and look at his physical footprint.
The living legacy.
Right. We need to examine how this figure exists in geography, culture, and identity today.
It's crucial to understand that Valmiki didn't just write these texts and vanish into the ether. He famously, and very uniquely for the time, wrote himself directly into his own epic.
Oh, like a self-insert.
Yeah. He appears as a living, breathing character within the Ramayana itself.
Right. And he doesn't just make a cameo. He appears during that incredibly painful moral dilemma we discussed earlier, when Rama makes the devastating choice to banish an innocent Sita to the forest to quell the public uprising. When she is cast out by the state, where does she go?
She finds refuge in the forest hermitage, the ashram of sage Valmiki. When the entire societal structure turns its back on her, Valmiki takes her in.
He gives her sanctuary.
He acts as a deeply compassionate moral guide, a protector, and a father figure to her. And it is while living in the safety of his ashram that Sita gives birth to Rama's twin sons, Lava and Kusha.
And Valmiki, the former bandit, becomes the teacher of the royal princes.
He does. He raises them, he provides their complete education, and most significantly, he teaches them to sing the entire 24,000 verses of the Ramayana that he has composed.
Full circle.
The epic eventually comes full circle when the teenage twins travel to Ayodhya and sing the epic in the royal court of Lord Rama himself, telling the king his own tragic, glorious story.
What I find so compelling about this section of the narrative is how these seemingly mythological events map directly onto actual physical geography that we can point to on a map today. It grounds the squeaking poetry in the dirt of the real world.
The geographical legacies are deeply embedded in the subcontinent's history. According to widespread historical tradition, Sita's twin sons, raised by Valmiki, went on to found two major historically significant cities.
Which cities?
Lava is considered the ancient founder of the modern, bustling city of Lahore, which is a major cultural hub in present-day Pakistan. And his brother Kusha is believed to have founded the nearby city of Kasur, also in the Punjab region of Pakistan.
The ancient mythology is literally the foundation stone of modern urban geography.
It's all connected.
And what about Valmiki's ashram itself, the physical location where he supposedly composed the verses and sheltered Sita?
While several regions claim the honor due to the spread of the epic, a very prominent and deeply revered belief is that his ancient ashram was located in a place called Sitabani.
Sitabani.
Today, Sitabani is a protected forest zone located right on the periphery of the famous Jim Corbett National Park in Uttarakhand, India. It's a tangible, physical landscape you can visit.
You can actually walk through it.
You can walk through the forests, where the first poet is believed to have watched the birds and composed the first verse. It anchors the soaring theology back to the earth.
But his legacy isn't just a matter of ancient geography. It is a fiercely alive, dynamic cultural force today.
Absolutely. His presence is celebrated on a massive scale. Every year, millions of people across the globe celebrate Valmiki Jayanti, the anniversary of his birth.
It's a huge event.
It occurs on the full moon day of the Ashwin month in the traditional Hindu calendar, a day also known as Sharad Purnima. It is marked by immense, joyous processions, deep prayers, and the continuous devotional recitation of his Ramayana.
He is worshipped not just as a poet, but as a saint who bridged the gap between the human and the divine.
But I want to tie this back to the socio-political research we discussed earlier with Dr. Jyothi, because the way Valmiki's name and legacy are being invoked today by specific communities is incredibly powerful.
It's not just religious. It's a profound tool for social empowerment.
It is a vital part of modern Indian identity politics. Today, there are many marginalized communities across India, particularly in northern regions like Punjab, Haryana, and Uttar Pradesh, who proudly and fiercely identify as Valmiki.
That taking the name.
They claim his vast intellectual and spiritual legacy directly as their own heritage. And what is most fascinating is that many modern scholars and activists within these communities entirely reject the Ratnakar, the degraded bandit origin myth.
They are actively fighting the mythologization that Dr. Jyoti theorized about.
Precisely. They view the bandit story as a later systemic fabrication designed by historical elites to demean his origins.
So they don't buy the anthill story.
No, they see Valmiki not as a redeemed criminal who needed divine intervention to be valuable, but as an ancient, brilliant, fiercely disciplined intellectual scholar who emerged organically from their own marginalized community.
Which is a huge shift in perspective.
They argue that his intellectual achievements were so undeniably vast that the elite classes had no choice but to invent a magical, degrading backstory to explain him away and absorb him into the orthodox pantheon.
They are reclaiming him as an intellectual icon of resistance. They are asserting that his legacy is historical proof that intellectual brilliance, supreme creativity, and undeniable moral authority are not, and never have been, limited by caste, birth, or social background.
It is a powerful, ongoing assertion of dignity and intellectual democracy.
It proves that the texts he wrote aren't just artifacts of the past. They are active, living battlegrounds for meaning, identity, and power in the contemporary world. So let's bring this all together. We started this deep dive looking at a violent highway robber hiding in the shadows of a forest. And we ended up discussing the foundational architecture of human consciousness, the sociological mechanisms of history, and modern political empowerment.
It's quite a journey. The immense, enduring duality of Valmiki is what makes him so endlessly fascinating to study. On one hand, the traditional devotional narrative gives humanity a beautiful, deeply comforting symbol of ultimate divine redemption.
It offers the profound promise that no matter how far you have fallen into darkness,
No matter how much terrible karma you have accrued, sincere repentance, the chanting of a sacred name, and the grace of the divine can wash you clean and allow truth to speak through you. It is a story of hope.
But on the other hand, the academic, sociological, and historical perspective gives us a testament to the supreme, almost unimaginable power of human intellectual labor.
It challenges us to look past the comforting veil of the supernatural and recognize the grueling, lifelong, systematic dedication required to synthesize the complex philosophies of Dharma and Advaita Vedanta into a mathematically perfect 24,000-verse overarching structure.
Both perspectives offer immense value. Whether you choose to view his verses as a spontaneous, flawless gift poured into an emptied vessel by the Creator God, or as the hard-fought result of decades of intense, marginalized scholarship defying the elite gatekeepers of his time, the undeniable physical result in the world is the same.
His work became the bedrock of a civilization's culture, its ethics, its art, and its understanding of the divine.
And as we close out this exploration today, there is one final image from the source material that I think synthesizes everything we've discussed perfectly.
And that is the image of the anthill itself, the Valmika.
The traditional sources frame the anthill as merely a miraculous byproduct of his deep meditation. The story goes that he sat so incredibly still for so long that the insects simply built their home over him, burying him until he emerged, transformed, like a spiritual butterfly from a cocoon.
It is presented as a story of passive, miraculous rebirth.
But if we look closely at the natural world and we consider what an anthill actually is, a profoundly different metaphor emerges.
Think about how ants build a massive, towering, complex architectural structure out of the dirt. They do not do it by magic.
They do not do it in a single, miraculous, spontaneous moment of divine inspiration.
They build it grain by single grain. It is the undeniable result of relentless, highly organized, excruciatingly slow, almost invisible daily labor by thousands of individuals over an immense period of time.
It requires a deliberate, stubborn accumulation of tiny individual pieces of earth to build a structure that can weather the storms.
So perhaps emerging from the anthill isn't just a literal story about a supernatural cocoon. Perhaps the Valmika is a beautiful, deeply ancient metaphor left for us about the very act of human creation itself.
Perhaps it is a metaphor for what it actually takes to write a 24,000-verse masterpiece. The myth might be telling us the truth in a poetic code.
To create something that truly changes the world, you cannot wait for a miraculous lightning strike. You have to sit down in the dirt, ignore the chaos and the doubts of the world around you, and simply do the work.
One syllable, one metered verse, one grain of sand at a time. Day after grueling day, year after silent year, until, eventually, through sheer, unyielding human will, you have built a mountain of thought that lasts forever.